Welcome to the next in my series of plein air videos where I'm trying to improve at painting from life in soft pastel. Normally I'm showing the lovely Andalusian landscape, but it's July and it's just too hot to paint outside. So instead, I'm off to my living room where I'm going to get some practice at working from life even if it's not outside. Because I really think that some of the best art comes from the most mundane, everyday things. Sure, it's nice to have an impressive mountain range to paint, but I think there's just as much beauty in the smaller scenes that we see around us every day. The light coming in through a doorway, a sunny windowsill, flower pots in the garden casting interesting shadows. There are compositions everywhere you look. Sometimes it's just deciding on one and going for it. The past few days I've been walking around my house with one of these. This is the viewfinder that I normally use when I'm painting on plein air, but it can be used to find a composition anywhere. So I've been holding it up in different spots in my house and in my garden. And I think I've settled on having a go at my patio doors because although technically this is not painting on plein air, at least I will be painting a little bit of outside, and it should be a nice juxtaposition between inside and outside. And I actually really love to paint interiors. I often paint interiors when I'm working on pet portraits. But I've also painted quite a few interior scenes with my own animals in them. But normally I'm working from photo reference, so this is going to be really nice working from life in my own living room. The one thing that I've decided to use a photograph for is to add one of my little dogs, Lola, on the mat, because earlier when I was deciding where to paint, she lay on the mat in a very nice position and I snapped a quick photo of her on my phone, so you'll see that as I progress. But everything else is going to be done from life here in my living room, and it's still going to give me a nice bit of practice working from life even though I'm not outside. But just like when I am working outdoors, I'm going to use this viewfinder to help me get my line sketch on the paper. So let's make a start. I'm using Canson velvet paper, and this is just 8 by 10 inches. I tend to keep it reasonably small when I'm working from life. I find that a little bit easier, although in this case there are lots of fiddly little details that were definitely quite tricky on this scale. I'm using a grey coloured pastel pencil, something lighter than black, and you'll see why in just a moment. So I'm sketching directly onto the paper, which I don't always do. But when it comes to working from life, and in particular landscapes, I try to be a little bit less fussy about my line sketch before I get started on the colour work. But in this case, you can see here I'm even picking up a ruler for just a few of the straight edges around the door frame, and just to help me get those down nice and straight to begin with. As you'll see later on, I don't continue using the ruler, but sometimes I will use the ruler in my initial sketch, as it helps me get it more precise at that stage, and it gives me a good straight line to follow with my soft pastels. So this was tricky. There is a little bit of outside and a little bit of inside, and the perspectives in this were tricky, and I've got to say that viewfinder really helped. It helps me a lot when I'm painting outdoors, but it helped me a lot to figure out the perspectives within this mostly man-made area. I especially find the table outside tricky, but at this stage I'm not worrying too much about details. I'm just trying to get the main shapes in. And now I want to add my little dog, who I photographed earlier in the day when I was just deciding exactly where I wanted to paint. She posed herself very nicely on this mat, and I thought it would be really nice to include her. So I took a quick snap on my phone, and this is the only part really where I will use the photo to help me out a little. When painting animals, it's unlikely that you get them to stay still for as long as you need them to. Now I've picked up a black pastel pencil. As you can see, the grey is nice and light. And I can just refine my sketch a little further here. I'm adding a little bit extra detail, especially on the leaves of the Monstero plant. It has quite big but intricate leaves, and so with the grey pencil I gave myself just the rough shapes and directions of the leaves, and I'm using that as a nice guide now to come in with the black pencil and just add a little bit of extra detail. I wouldn't normally go into this amount of detail if I'm painting outside and it's mostly foliage and trees, but this is quite different. A lot of straight edges, a lot of man-made things, and I just need my sketch to be a little more precise. It's now the next morning because yesterday, by the time I actually decided what to paint, got everything set up, chose some colours to work with, and then I spent about an hour and a half on the line sketch, which you've just seen. And by the time I did all of that, the light outside had changed a lot. And what I really want is the back wall in the patio area to be very bright. So the best time of day for that is in the morning, and I decided to come back to it this morning. So now I am going to make a start on the colour work. The only part that I really have to race against the time with the light and shade is the outside area, as inside stays pretty much the same. So let's make a start on the colour work and get those lovely shadows in before they move. So for my colours, I'm using mostly Unison soft pastels with a few Terry Ludwigs, and that is a combination that I use a lot, two of my absolute favourite brands of soft pastel. And I'm starting outside first because, as I mentioned, the light out here changes rapidly. That's always the problem when painting on plein air. That sun just keeps on moving, and whatever shadows are being cast move also. So I wanted to get this back wall with the slightly diagonal shadows coming from those poles along the top. Pretty soon after this, the shadows are completely vertical, and I just preferred the look of them at a slight angle and the way the light and shade was outside at this particular time of the morning. The sunlight does come into the room, but not until much later in the evening, so the light inside the room doesn't really change that much throughout the day. So I knew if I could just get this outside area in, then I had a long time to focus on the inside area. So I'm trying to use lots of vibrant and bright colours outside. And I want that to really contrast the darkness that we have indoors. And that's such a typically Spanish thing, where you have this intensity to the sunlight outside. But the Spanish houses are built in such a way that they're quite dark inside, so they don't let a lot of sunlight in usually. And of course that makes sense when you live somewhere this hot. So I really wanted to try and capture the contrast between the darkness inside the door and the intense brightness just outside. So moving on to the inside now, and the values that I'll use in here will be much darker. I really like the strength of that dark eggplant Terry Ludwig pastel as the door frame. So I tried to avoid using pure black. Instead, I'm using that dark Terry Ludwig as my black. And my whole aim here is to capture the light and shade. So another thing that I had to remember when working on the tiles is that there is no dog in front of me in real life casting a shadow on the tiles. So I just quickly referred to my photo reference of little Lola to see what effect she was having on the tiles just behind her. So if you're adding things into a composition, just remember that they are going to be affected by the same light that everything else in the scene is. They're going to possibly cast a shadow. And these are all things to think of if you want to marry images together or add things in later on. But at this stage, I could really feel the piece coming together, and that is usually a moment when I will take a little break. I had a little snack and used that time to just assess how this is going. I like to do that no matter what I'm working on. Take several breaks, walk away from the piece, go get a cup of tea, although in this weather it's not tea I'm drinking. But either way, just take a break. Come back with fresh eyes. You can wander past the painting and have a good look at it. Really helps though to just step away for a little bit of time. And when I came back to it, I got on with painting little Lola. So here you can see I'm making use of that photo reference, making sure that I add all of the appropriate shadows around her to really ground her into the piece, and using lots of reflected light as my colours on her body. I love adding little Lola into things because her white colouring is always so interesting to paint. Sometimes she's bright blue. She just picks up whatever colours are going on around her and reflects all of that. And then you get the little bright white edges that just seem to solidify that idea of light and shade. And of course, her dainty little black ears always look so recognisable when I paint her, especially on a smaller scale like this, which I've done many times with Lola. So it felt like everything here was quite miniature. The pots, everything was quite tiny to work on this scale. But I didn't use any pastel pencil for any of that. I really stuck with the little pieces of soft pastel. I broke several pastels as I worked on this just to find some nice sharp edges. And I wasn't being overly particular about the crispness of my edges. I was quite happy to let many of the edges look a little bit more rough in this, because what I'm aiming for here is something that looks like it has a bit of energy, similar to when I'm painting on plein air and doing landscapes these days. I'm really trying to find another language of mark making, one that isn't quite so obsessed with the perfection of the edges and the lines everywhere. I'm quite happy for some parts of this to look a little bit more rough. And sometimes just limiting yourself to the soft pastel sticks really does that. It can be easy to rely on the pastel pencils for the smaller details. The one moment where I did pick up some pastel pencil was just to help shape Lola's ears, because that is just quite a small, delicate area and they're so recognizable in their shape. But apart from that, absolutely no pastel pencil, and I really enjoyed the challenge of blocking in all of the leaves on my lovely Monstero plant. It has started to take over the living room, and it's an absolute beauty of a plant. I kind of regretted starting to paint it when I was sketching it out. But actually, because I put some effort into the sketching process, by the time it came to painting the leaves, it really wasn't too bad at all. But I really enjoyed my time working on this, partly because I was pretty comfortable inside away from the sunshine, but also I just love an interior scene, and show me an interior with an animal in it, and that's even better. So I think that's me finished. Maybe I'll have another look at it tomorrow with fresh eyes, but I'm pretty pleased with it and I had a lot of fun working on this. A great way to stay out of the sun but still get some painting practice in. And although it's not plein air, a lot of the basic principles are still the same. A lot of perspective to figure out, and that line sketch was very tricky because there were a lot of straight lines, a lot of man-made things, which you don't usually get in a landscape. But I really enjoyed this and I hope that you enjoyed seeing it come together, and that maybe it will inspire you if you're not able to go very far from your home, that you can still practice painting from life and to just look around you and see what inspiration you have on your own doorstep. If you've enjoyed this video, then do go and check out my other plein air videos, or just have a look around all of my playlists here on YouTube. I have lots of videos here all about soft pastel. And then if you'd like to learn even more from me, come and visit me on my Patreon channel, where you can find out how to paint in soft pastel using real-time tutorials. And hopefully next month I will return to painting outdoors and sharing some of the beautiful Spanish landscape with you. But thanks so much for watching this one. Please do remember to hit subscribe. And until next time, happy pasteling.